Okay, everybody, I'm going to start because we're recording today, and I'm just going to record and I will save it. If you're not here on time, then you won't be able to watch the demonstration today, okay? All right, fabulous. Okay, so today what I'm going to be doing is drafting, and I was hoping you guys could take notes or either draft right along with me. I'm going to draft the extended bodice. Okay, so as usual, I have my table set up. I'm going to draft with a pencil, even though I'm going to be using pencil, and then if I decide to use a marker, then I'll use one. So I'm drafting the extended bodice. So we have drafted the front and back bodice. We've drafted the front and back bodice, the front and back skirt, and the sleeve, and we've drafted pants from the skirt. Okay, so now we're going to get into combined pattern pieces. So some examples of combined pattern pieces would be if you use the the front bodice and the back bodice and the front and back skirt to create a dress, or if you use the combination of the bodice and the sleeve to create one pattern. So you're taking two or more pattern pieces and making one pattern from that. So now we are not drafting when we do that, we're making patterns from the patterns that we have. Okay, so today though, what I'm going to do is show you one way, and I say that because you know there's other ways to do it, but I'm going to show you one way that you can draft the extended bodice, meaning it's going to be the front and back bodice, okay, like we normally have. That would stop at the waist, but we're going to extend it to the hip line. Okay, so we're going to extend it to the hip line, and this is a good pattern you want to have if you're drafting jackets or skirts or coats. It just makes it easier to already have the extended bodice already drafted. Okay, so I think I want to thank everybody for all the warm wishes too. I took a little tumble out of my chair, and so I'm a little bit of pain. I'm old, and I can't take a lot of falls these days, but I'm doing pretty good. Okay, all right. I'm hoping to use a pencil just in case. I don't like to use this one because it kind of bleeds on this paper, I noticed. So I'm going to get a pencil. Let's see. All right. Okay. All right. So of course my paper is folded, and I have my paper folded. Again, you don't have to have your paper folded. I have mine folded because I'm going to draft the front here, and then I'm going to draft the back on the other side. So as usual, this is going to be my center front. Okay, I'm going to come down just a little bit from the top because this time I might need all of my paper because I'm drafting the extended bodice. So here's my top line, which is my shoulder line. Pretty messy. Okay. All right, and I'm going to come in just a little bit, and I'm going to draw my center front line. So instead of cutting this directly on and the fold. This is going to be my new center front line here. Taking it all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to come up a little bit from the bottom of the draft too, and make my not my waist, so this is going to be my hip line. So this extended bodice goes from the top of your body, not to your waist, but goes to the hip line. All right, so let's get that out of the way. Now, so this is my center front here. All right, as usual, I'm going to start off with the drawing my lines from the center front, but you could take your front bodice and your front skirt and line them up against the line here, and you could also do this, but I want you guys to know how to do it without it so you can understand what each of the lines represents. Okay, all right, so I'm going to start with the bottom, and I'm going to measure up from the bottom, because remember, this is my hip line, not my waistline now. So HL there, and I'm going to measure up from my hip the amount, the measurement that would be from my hip line, from the fullest part of my hip up to, from the fullest part of my hip up to where my waist would be. And so for us it's 6 inches. So I'm going to put something here. So when I put that there, that is now my waistline. Okay? So I'm going to square a line across and put WL here. So that's my waistline. Here's my hip line here. All right? And I'm going to go up again from my waistline. Now I'm going up to my bust line. Okay? And for us, that's going to be about 7 inches. All right? And I will square a line across so I can label that bust line. Okay? Now I could have started at the top and did this, but I thought I'd start at the bottom, okay? All right, so it's important when we're drafting that you follow the steps in order. So this is the bust line, okay? So hip line, waistline, bust line. And so now I'm going up from the waistline, and I'm going to put in my, what would be my center front length, okay? Center front length. And so for us, that is 15 and a half, okay? So now that is going to be my neckline. So what I'm going to do with this, because I already know that I don't need to have this line go all the way across the page, but I do need it to go over about 3.5 inches, because I know what my neckline is. So that's 3, and then that's a half. Stop right there. Okay, we'll see. All right, now, and I'm going to put NL there, neckline, center front, okay, and this represents from the neck, the shoulder down to the bust line, from the shoulder down to the waistline, from the shoulder down to the hip line, okay? All right, now we're going up to the top of the page, and I'm going to measure and mark on this top line, shoulder line, my half of my shoulder width, okay? Which my shoulder width was 14. I'm drafting for a size 8. So it's 14, half of 14 would be 7, okay? I'm going to add some ease in here. So I'm going to add just a 1/2 inch ease, okay? Also, now that I've done that, I'm going to come down and mark my shoulder slope. And I'm not going, for this size 8, I took the measurements from my mannequin, and I also measured a real body, and a 1/2 inch is good enough. Okay, so that is my shoulder line. Now I'm going to mark my shoulder, okay, that measurement that goes from your shoulder tip to where your neck and shoulder meets on your body, and that's usually on the average woman about 5 inches. So I'm going to go, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here, okay, and I'm just going to put it right here at my slope mark, and I'm going to move it, turn it, and turn it until it touches this top line. And when it touches this top line, there you go. All right, and I can draw in my new shoulder line. Okay, now I can take my curved ruler and go in here now, and I can draw in my neckline. Okay, all right, so I've got my neckline somewhat. I'll fix that. I don't like the way that looks. Yeah, right there. All right. And usually we don't erase, but I don't want you guys to, if you only see the draft and don't know what's going on, I don't want you to be confused. Okay? All right. So now, the next thing I'm going to do is come down and measure 1/2 of my armhole. Notice where I'm coming from. This is my new shoulder tip. This is no good up here anymore. And I'm going to come down and measure 1/2 of my armhole, so my front armhole. And that's going to be 7, but, okay, I'm going to move this up so that I can start here, yep, and that my ruler is straight, and I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, okay, and I'm going to add some ease. So I'm coming down another 1/2 inch. That would put me right here. And I'm going to go ahead and draw that line in, okay? All right. Then I'm going to square a line using this point here across the page, and this is my upper bust or chest line, okay? Okay, so I'm going to put CL chest line, all right? Now I'm going to go down here to my hip measurement, and I just want to check and make sure you guys can see. So I'm just checking the camera. Good. Okay. All right. And so now what I'm going to do is come down here, and I'm going to mark my circumference measurements. Okay. So I've got my horizontal lines. Now I'm going to go and use my measurements that are divided by 4. And where there is not a dart, I'm going to add ease. Okay, so here at the hip line divided by 4. So if I use my tape here, the hip line was 35. So it's 1/2 of 35. So I'll find 35 on here, fold it in half. Okay, 1/2 of 35, 17.5. Okay, so I need half one more time. All right, and I'm at my hip line. I know we're used to working where we're at the waistline. So now I've got my hip divided by 4, and it is 8 3/4. 8 3/4. Okay, so 8 3/4. But I'm going to again add some ease, so I'm going to mark that, and then I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch ease there, okay? Because this is going to be a sloper for a size 8, but it's going to be the extended bodice, okay? All right, so I'm going to add 1/4 of an inch here. Ease. All right, now I'm going to go up to the waistline, and the dart intake is 1 inch, So the waist divided by 4. Okay. My waist was 30. Okay. So if I come to 30 divided by 4, you guys know how much I hate to have to go and get the good old calculator, and I hate doing math while I'm doing it, but I don't mind it so much if I'm just folding my my trusty measuring tape. Okay, so divided by 4, I've got 7.5, and I'm going to add 1 inch to that because I'm putting a 1-inch dart in here. Okay, so if I just add the 7.5, I would be here. So I'm going to add 1 inch for my dart. Okay. When I get to my bust line, my bust 36 divided by 4, I'm going to add some e's there because we don't have a dart. So 36 divided by 4, go here. I'm sorry, not 36, 35 divided by 4. Try to remember these measurements for a size 8 because we usually use these for drafting these test patterns. Okay, so now that's at my bust line, and I have 8 3/4, 8 3/4. So I'm going to add a 1/2 inch ease here. Okay, so I'm going to add a 1/2 inch ease here. All right. Now I'm going to my upper bust. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to divide my under bust or chest measurement by 4, and I'm going to add 1/2 inch ease to it. And in this case, there's not going to be much difference because my size 8 for the mannequin matches up. It matches up almost with this. So you'll notice something now. Okay, I can come back here down to the waist now. Okay, and I can connect all of these points. So for the time being, even though we're going to add some shape to this, I'm just going to connect these points. Okay. Okay. So you can kind of see where we're going a little bit with this. Now I'm going to do the darts. So you know on your basic bodice that you have your waist dart, right? And you know on your basic skirt you have a waist dart too. Okay, so we're going to have a double-ended dart or a fisheye dart here. Okay, so here's how we're going to do it. We're going to come over on our bust line just like we normally would and mark our bust span. Okay, half of our bust span, and in this case is 3.5. Put that here, and that gives us two things: the center of our dart leg, and it also gives us our bust point. Okay, so, and I'm going to write BP right there. Now I'm going to square a line down, okay, from that point. But here's how I'm going to get my double-ended dart. So I'm going to square a line down to my waistline, okay, and I'm going to extend that line down to the near the hip, but I have to make sure I don't go 2 inches, that I'm at least 2 inches away from this hip line. So if I put myself a little guide right there, I can extend this line to that point. Okay, and of course it needs to be straight. Okay, still not long enough. Let's put it down there. All right, so this is 2 inches. That's very important. There needs to be 2 inches, okay, between the end of this dart and your hip line. And so the way that works is just like up here, we have to have an area where our bust is the roundest, the fullest. We can't have a dart going to that area because we don't want to have that sharp point. So we'll mark 1 inch down. That would be the top of our dart. Well, in the case of the hips, same thing. We want this dart to stop before it gets to the fullest part of the hip, before it gets into the curve area. Let's see what someone's in here. Okay. All right. So now that I have that, I'm going to come to the waist, even though it doesn't look like the waist because we got this here, and I'm going to put in my 1 inch dart. So if I do that, I'm going, even though this is going to be both of these darts, I'm going to come here and I'm going to mark 1 inch over here, 1/2 inch over here, and 1/2 inch over here. Okay, and then I'm going to connect my dart legs. So here's how I'm going to do it. Here's the 1 inch away from the bust line, and here's the waist. Okay, and now I'm going to mark from this line down to the end of my dart leg that is 2 inches above the fullest part of the waist, the hip. Okay, so we got that, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Okay. Okay. Here we go. All right, so there is my double-ended dart, or my fisheye dart. Okay, so this is the waist, this is the bust, this is the hip line, and now this part is done for a moment. Now I'm going to go up and I'm going to work on my armhole. Same thing as we always do. The rest of it is, this part anyways, is that we're going to divide this in half. So we'll come here, mark it there, and we'll come in 3/4 of an inch. That's standard. We have to remember that. So that's 1, 2, and 3, 3/4 of an inch. Okay, and then we can draw in our armhole. But remember, you can always use your ruler to make yourself a little guideline. Again, guideline is the operative word. It's just so you don't go too deep into that curve there. So this is my shoulder tip here. So I'm going to do this in 2 parts. And again, these rulers and things are just for to help you to be as a guide, and to help you to draw in your lines or true up your lines. You could freehand this and go back and use your ruler to draw it in. Okay, but when you first start drafting and you're trying to get used to doing things, it helps. Okay, so the important thing is to remember that this ruler has to touch this line, not all the way out here, but in here someplace, so that it makes sense. So you can't just lay your ruler there and go, I got it. You have to do some manipulating, right, to try to get it so that it makes sense. All right, so for me, I can start right out here, okay, and then I can connect it here. Okay, and I'm just working with it, and then once I get the shape I want, then I can go back in and draw it in really good. Okay, all right, so now we've got our armhole in here now, and I'm going to just, so we've got our shoulder line here, our neck is in there, armhole is here, we've got our double-ended dart. Now I'm going to come down here where I've made my combination, where I've added on my extension, and I could use 2 things. I could use this ruler and do it, or I could use my hip curve and do it. Okay, this is a size 8 pattern. And from the measurements you can tell there's not a lot of curve. This isn't a really curvy figure here. So one thing we want to do is make sure that we kind of keep some definition in there, but not to the point where it would look like it wouldn't work, you know, it wouldn't be reality. So look where I'm at here. Okay, so here's the bottom here, and then here's the measurement here. So I'm coming up here like this. Okay, and now I'm going to draw my curve in really nice. Okay. All right, so now I've got this part done. I am going to have a bust dart, so I'm going to create my bust dart after I have drafted the back pattern. So now that I'm done with this, except for I want to go ahead and put in my notches here. You know how that is. If you don't, then you'll forget. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 7/8. Okay, 8 and 7/8 divided by 3. So I'm going to take, of course, take my trusty tape here and fold it once. Okay, all right, and then I'm going to fold it again. Okay. And now when I come here, the bottom third is going to be where my notch is going to be, and our notches in the front pattern we have in the armhole is just 1. Okay, 1. All right, so while I'm here, let's go ahead and put some information here. This is the front. Okay, this is a size 8. There is no seam allowance added. Okay, and we are to cut 2. Okay, just some other little notes you might put on here would be how much the dart is. You know, if this is a pattern that you're working on, you want to put as much information on it as possible. And if you're working in a room with other people, you definitely want to make sure you put some information on here. So that being done, then I can go ahead now and put my grain line on here too. And when you do your grain line, the main thing you want to do is make sure that it takes up some of the pattern. You don't want to put a little one up here and something down here. So you want to make sure, and I like to put mine near the center front. Okay, and you have to make sure this line is straight and that it touches all the portions of the draft. So I'm going to start about right here and come all the way down here. Okay, there's my grain line. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to cut this out. Before I do, I will quickly go over what we did. Okay, so of course, since I didn't use 2 separate pattern pieces, I drafted the extended bodice. Then that meant that I've actually drafted the front bodice and half of the skirt pattern. So we still used the full length, but we used an extended amount of length because we went to the hip line. Okay, we took all of our other measurements just like we normally would, from the waist up to the bust line. Okay, and then from the waist up to the center front. So we had the full length, then we had the center front length, and then everything else followed in the same way that we would draft our front bodice. We just extended this so that it comes to the fullest part of the hip line. Okay, so I'm going to cut this out. Okay. And then I will show you how we can draft the back. So if you notice with patterns that when we draft a pattern, if we draft the front first, We can transfer some things, some lines to the back, but we cannot just lay this down and turn it the other side and then say, okay, now this is the back. We can't do that. We're not the same in the back as we are in the front. Okay? All right. So one thing that is important when you draft any pattern for your using set of measurements is that you always do a sample out of muslin and then do a fitting with it so that you can make sure that everything fits perfect, because we're humans and sometimes we don't get things accurate, and this is something we want to be accurate these master patterns, because any problem we have here will carry on to every pattern we make from this master pattern here. Okay, so in fact the master pattern has not come to be yet. Even though I've finished doing this part here, when I do the back, we still need to make a sample out of muslin and fit it on the size 8, make the changes, and then transfer that back to the paper. Then we'll have our master pattern. Okay. Okay. Now you guys are probably looking at this double-ended dart going, so now what, right? We've got this double-ended dart. Well, if you're going to use this to make other patterns from, then this would be a master pattern. You take it and lay it on fresh paper, trace it, hang your master back up, and then you'd have your working pattern that you can make all your changes to. But before you do that, you have to be able to trace this pattern, right? So in order to trace the dart in here, we simply cut it out, just like we notch out our notches so that we can trace easier. We'll do the same thing here. So what I like to do is take it and fold it right in the center where that dart is. Okay, right on that center line. Okay. Try to do a better job than I'm doing here. Okay. So now that I've got that, then I can go in and I'm going to cut that inside of that dart away, because we don't need that, right? And it'll make it easier to trace this master pattern onto fresh paper, okay? Which I like, because then I don't have to trace it in there. I don't have to figure out the dart. I can just trace it and be done. And you'll find in most master patterns, slopers do not have the dart, the extra in there. Now I'm gonna, I got a notcher, but if you don't have a notcher, then right here where you have this notch at, this mark for the notch, I just cut a little V here. Okay, and so now there's no way we can get this mixed up with the back. All right. Okay. If you have any questions about the steps doing this, be sure to note them so we can talk about it in class. Okay, so now let's look at the back pattern. And we're going to come back to this front pattern, but just keep in mind that I said we're going to have a bust dart. I can't get the bust dart in there until I get the back pattern drafted, because the amount of the armholes and this dart have something in common. Okay, they need each other. All right. Okay, so I'm gonna fold my paper, because I think when I fold it, it'll still be wide enough for me to draft. I gotta make sure though. I better behave myself. Okay, I'm gonna leave it open. All right, just in case I don't want to run out of paper. All right. Okay, so now it's time for me to draft the back pattern. Now, like I was saying before, there's some things that will stay that we can use from the front for the back. And here's how you do it. You're still going to have a line at the top for our guideline up here, okay? So you're still going to need to have a guideline. Okay, so you've got your guideline, and you're still going to need to have something to mark the waist, but here's and the hip. So here's what I'm going to do. Remember, with these patterns, that the center front is going this way, which means that we want the back to go the opposite way, right? So that means that it would look like this, right? Okay. So then, since I've got my guideline up here, I can put this here, and I don't want to go over that edge, and I'm just going to put this here, down here. All right. So some things I can transfer. One of the things that I can transfer over is going to be this dart. Okay, the location of the dart is going to be the same in the back as it was in the front. Okay, so that's one thing. Even though this is going to be the center back, it might not necessarily, indefinitely, to be honest, will be different from the center front and the full length in the front, because in the back you don't have a bust. Okay, so your back is going to be a different measurement. So note that this is right at the tip here, and then when I get down here, that's the end of my draft. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to first put in my front line here, and all I want to do is make sure I have a nice straight line for my center back. Okay. All right, so the paper comes out a little bit right there, but I'll be able to catch that. So now, and my draft ends here, just a little bit from the bottom. Here is my hip line. That doesn't change, so I can mark that on both sides. And now I can go ahead and also go ahead and put my dart in. So the way I'm going to do it is, and the cool thing is I can see right through the paper, so I can make sure I get it. So I have no excuse to get this wrong. Okay, this is the waist. Okay, and now I can go ahead and trace the rest of the dart. And I can trace also the shape here on the side of the side seam. Okay, so I'm stopping somewhere, which would be right at that armhole. That's where I stop. Okay, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and put in my dart here. So most of pattern making differences and things like that have to do with the fact that there's a difference between the front and the back of your patterns. So I've got my dart, I've got this part in, and then Now I have to come here, and I'm just going to mark here and mark the shoulder tip. So it is possible that the slope in the back is different from your slope in the front because we don't have bust in our back, right? So, and remember our slope, we went down a 1/2 inch. Once you get this made out of the muslin sample and you mark the shoulder line, you might find that there is a difference. Okay. And so let's see, I think I'm ready to take this pattern up. I mean, I put myself a little line here so I can put where the other things were, but I really don't need them anymore. Okay, so now I don't need this pattern anymore. Okay, I've taken what I can take from that. All right, so I'm just going to go through here, and the lines that I'm missing a bit of, I'm going to true up all my lines here. There, and then my hip line down here. Alright, and then waistline here. Okay, and I'm going to take my curved ruler and go ahead and true up my little curved line here. Maybe I'll use this one. Yeah, this one looks a little bit better. Alright. And then turn it and move it down here. If I think that needs any more curve in there, I can just take this and put it right up against it and that little curve there. Okay, so something I do want to put is my chest line or under bust line. It is what it would be in the front, but in the back that is right what you're going to need to mark your armhole, right? Be right there. Okay, and I'm going to square line straight down, and that is going to be for my back armhole. I've already got the slope marked there, so I just want to make my armhole line here. All right, so now I've got my block ready to make any changes that would need to be made for my back pattern. So in the back, we know our full length is going to be different from the front. So the full length is something we usually take from the waist up to the neckline. So in the back, in the front it was 15. In the back, it's going to be 1 inch difference, right? So it's going to be 16. So that is my CFL, CBL, center back lines, CBL. Okay, and then this shoulder length was 5 inches. Okay, so I can really just go ahead and I can do it by hand or draw it in better later, however. All right, and so that's done right there. So now I need to measure down 5 inches here because I'm getting ready to work on my armhole. Okay, and we know that the back bodice has a dart. Even if you don't see it, usually we don't see it, it's usually transferred into the armhole. Okay, so I want to measure down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. Square my line across here because I'm going to draw in my dart. So there we go. So that's one way, or you could measure and find the halfway point here. Either way you want to do it. This I'm going to have is how I'm going to get my dart going here. So I'm going to now divide the shoulder width length in half, which is 5, so it's going to be 2.5. So I'm going to find 2.5 here. Okay, so that's 1, 2, and that's the half. Okay, and I'm going to square a line from that point down to this back line I just put on here. And it is supposed to be diagonal because we've got a slope here. Okay, so that's how that looks. Now, what that line did is showed me how long my dart can be, because I'm putting my dart in the armhole temporarily or maybe permanently, depending on what happens when I match it up with the front. Okay, and this is going to be a very small dart, 1/2 inch, so I'm going to put 1/4 inch on each side. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and connect the legs, and I have my dart here. Alright, and that is my back dart. Now, another thing that finding this point does is help me with drawing in my armhole. So the armhole in the back doesn't come in like as we do in the front. It basically is not complicated because we don't have many complications in the back of our bodies. Okay, so again, I'm trying to show you on this draft that you should use your tools to true up your lines, but okay, see? And now to draw that in so that it's nice and neat, then I'll go ahead and use my ruler just to true up my lines, make them nice and pretty. Okay, there we go. All right, so that's the back armhole. Now our back is done. Okay, except for what we have to do. You know, we have to put in our grain line, and again, I like to put it near the center back and near the center front, and make sure it touches all parts of the pattern. Okay, so I'll go a little bit down here and go straight up, and then got my grain line. I'm going to write my information here. This is the back. It's a size 8. There's no seam allowance added. You need to cut 2. Okay. All right. So that's the back. Now we aren't done because now we have to work on our armholes so we can make sure that they match up. Okay. All right. So I'm going to cut this pattern out, and then I'm going to put the armholes together. So you'll notice on some of the videos that some of the pattern makers, they draft the back first, and then some draft the front first. I do, it depends on how I feel. Okay, I don't really have a preference for it, because I'm still gonna, to me, I'm gonna be doing the same thing. It just depends. Okay. Oh, I know what we have to do. We have to put our notches in our back armhole. We don't want to forget those. Okay. So we have 2 notches in the back armhole. Go ahead and cut this out. So I will have these patterns in the studio for you guys next week to look at, and I hope that you try this draft at home, and that if you have any questions, that you bring those questions to class, and that you're prepared for us to move on to our next combined pattern, which is going to be the sleeve and the bodice. Okay, and You enjoy that. Okay, so now just need to work on my dark here because I'm going to cut it out as well. So I'm going to want to make sure I got these lines really good. Even. Okay, and I want to make sure I find the center because I want to use that in order to fold it and cut it out. Oops. But that made it so much easier to trace, you know, having that dark cut out. So now I'm just going to fold that in half. Right on that line. Okay. And I'm going to cut the dot away. I hope you guys are loving pattern making as much as I love pattern making. Who would have thought it? A person who doesn't like math would like pattern making, where you have to be so accurate with your math, right? Okay. My math teachers would be shocked. Okay. All right. So let's now put our notches in our back armhole. So I'm going to take this paper we're not using and get that out of the way. And I hope you guys can see the table really good. Okay. All right. So the same thing as what we did with the front armhole. We're going to measure it first. And so I'm just going to start here at the bottom here. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that's 8, and 9 and a 4th. So I'm going to take my 9 and a 4th and divide it by 3. Fold it in half first, and then I'm going to fold it this first half here so I can get that bottom third. Okay. And once I have that, then I'm just going to put in my first notch here. And a 1/2 inch away from that notch is where I'm going to put my second notch, because we know in the back we have 2 notches, right? Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those notches out. Again, what that does, it makes it really easy for me to two things. Definitely identify the front pattern from the back pattern, but also makes it easy for me to trace this pattern and not have to worry about where the notches are and things like that. Okay? So I want you guys to notice at the front and back here, right? Some of this stuff out of the way. Alright. So we have the front here and the back. If I put them together like this, see, then we can kind of look and see what happened, what the armhole, the top of the sleeve and the bottom of the sleeve will look like. Okay. All right. So now what I'm going to do is connect these two this way. Okay. And I'm going to measure the armhole and see if so our armholes were 14, and we added a 1/2 inch or a quarter of an inch ease, I think, to those. So I want to measure and see what we come up with for the total armhole now. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and a half almost. Okay, now 16 and a half. So let me put this down. 16 and a half total. And let's measure these separately now, because there should be a difference between the front and back armhole, and we know why, right? Because the front of the body is different from the back. So now I'm going to measure here again. This is my front. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and 1/4. So my front armhole is 8 1/4. Let's see what the back one is. Okay. So 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 8 and 5 eighths. Okay, so the back armhole is larger than the front. Okay, so we're almost perfect, because I got a little bit on the end here. I forgot to cut off here. We're almost perfect because at the end of the day, that's really what you want to see. But we also have to remember something. We have our shoulder dart in the back added to our armhole. So we've got 1/4 inch there. Okay, so we've got 1/4 inch. We've got a 1/2 inch dart here. So if we take that 1/2 inch away, that will make the back smaller, right? So we're not going to do that. So we want to put a dart in the front, and usually what happens when you put a dart in the front is the way you find out exactly what it is after you measure the armholes, then whatever the difference is between these two. Oh, I heard somebody. I'm like, who's there? Okay, so the difference between the armholes. So I'm going to use my notch here, and what you could do, as a matter of fact, I don't want to use the notch, is find a halfway point in your armhole and use that. So if I fold this in half, okay, and put a little notch there, then I've got my point that I can go, so that I can draw this line to the bust point. That's my mid armhole. All right, so now I'm doing that because I'm going to open this up. And I'm going to make myself a dart here. Okay, so I'm going to take it out of the armhole, and I'm going to put it here, my dart intake. So what that's going to do is make this armhole smaller by the amount of that dart, but I'm not taking that amount away. I'm putting it in a bust dart where it needs to be. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. This is my bust line. Some people put the dart there. I don't like to put the dart there. I like to put the dart below it. So I'm going to measure 1 inch below that, and that's going to be the center of my dart. So now I'm going to take that and connect that to my bust point. Now, I did not forget that we cannot go within 1 inch of this point here. So I can mark that off so I can be sure of it. Okay, so now it's time for me to use the slash and spread technique to move some of that intake into my bust dart. Okay, so let me get my tape. All right. And I'm going to just take enough off of what I think I need. Let's see if I might as well. So now it's time for me to use the slash and spread technique in order to move my dart. Okay, so what is happening here is I'm going to take some of this in here, some of this 8 1/4, and I'm going to move it here so that I can have a bust dart. Okay, so the first thing I'm slashing is the area that I want to take that amount from, which is the armhole, and I'm slashing all the way to, not through, the bust point. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the point that I marked here where I want to put that intake to, where I want the dart to actually be, and I'm going to slash that to, but not through that bust point. Okay, now so now I'm going to look here, and I'm going to take this and open it up as much as I want to. Okay, I can't open it up but a little bit because I have only a little difference between the front and the back. Okay, so about like that. Now this dart will most likely, it can get bigger. It may not stay this size, of this amount. Most likely when I cut it out of the muslin and actually put this on the form, it's going to change. Okay, so now what I would do is lay this on fresh paper and trace in and true up my new armhole, and now I've got my dart here. So I've got my bust dart, and now my armholes should match up perfectly. Okay, so this is just one way and the basics for making an extended bodice. Okay, there's other ways to do it. Like I said, you could take the front and back bodice and the front and back skirt, and you could create a pattern as well. All right, the main things I want you guys to take away from this is that this is the first combined pattern draft. Okay, so you need to make sure that you know how to do it. Now I'm going to show you guys how to use the I'll give you a handout on how to use the two pattern pieces, the skirt and the top, to create this same thing. Basically, all you're really trying to do is get the dart intake, the darts matched up so that you have this dart, and also here you're going to make sure that you have the waistline correct. This leads to jumpsuits, jumpers, dresses, coats, everything. This is the foundation pattern for it, because you can take this now and make it longer, shorter, or flare out, or do whatever you want to do, but this part up here is always going to fit that size 8. Okay, all right, I'm going to come over and take the camera off, and I'm going to see if you guys, if anybody's in class, and if they have questions. If not, I am recording. It takes it 24 hours before it'll be on the channel, and I'm going to upload some other videos on there that I have too. So here we go. Your mics and let's say hello to each other. Let me
hello.
Hello. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
You nothing still, nothing to complain about. I fell out of my chair. I was leaning over and trying to untangle some cords underneath my desk. And me and the chair, we just laid down on the floor together.
Oh.
So it was my knees and shoulders at first, and now it's my back and my knee, and so I'm just trying to rest as much as I can and, keep the ice and the heat thing going back and forth. But I am good. So what did you guys think about the draft? Were you able to see good and follow along?
Yeah, I was able to. I think it seemed really straightforward based on the knowledge that we have from drafting a skirt and a bodice for me.
Any questions from anybody? Okay. So that is the first combined pattern, and so we're going to do a foundation for a bodice and a sleeve combination. So if you've ever seen a baseball jacket, where the seams are on a baseball jacket, they're kind of curved out, like the seam is coming from the neckline or something like that. That is a raglan sleeve, and that sleeve is that you make that sleeve first by starting out with a dolman sleeve. So basically that's a pattern where it's a master pattern where the bodice and the sleeve are connected together. Okay, so what you'll find out is when we're talking about slopers, so if you make some for yourself, then you would make, of course, the 5-piece foundation. Then you would do the extended bodice like we have today. You would do your pants sloper, and then you would do your combined slopers, so in case you wanted to make a raglan sleeve garment or coat or jacket or a dress or something, or a dolman sleeve. But all of these sleeves, even the kimono sleeve, come from that one master pattern, okay? And so what I'm trying to do is move us into designing, okay? So does everybody have paper at home? Anybody that does not have paper? Okay, good. So I want you to try to draft the combined, the extended bodice. Okay, and then I'm going to send a video, and I'm going to upload this video. I'm going to put it on the YouTube channel, and it takes 24 hours for it to get over